32 female veteran humiliated at the shooting range, until her first shot left everyone stunned. All they saw was a woman with a limp, scars on her face, and an old Glock in her hand. No one asked her name. No one welcomed her. At Lone Star, the range where elite marksmen judged with smirks, she was just an outsider, a lucky shot at best. But when the first bullet left the barrel, the entire range fell silent. And that was only the beginning. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from, and if this story means something to you, don't forget to subscribe. The August heat came down like a hammer on the scrubland southeast of Austin, baking the clay soil until it split in thin red veins. Cars shimmered on the asphalt outside Lone Star Precision Range, their steel skins radiating waves that made the whole parking lot pulse. At 9:43 a.m., the glass doors hissed open, and a woman stepped inside, carrying nothing more impressive than a faded canvas tote. Emma Cole, 36, wore a field gray shirt that had long since lost its creases, the cuffs shiny where cotton had thinned against the skin. A pair of jeans, knees whitened, hems frayed, fell over desert tan combat boot. A light brace cinched her left calf, forcing her stride into a small hook and drag that clicked each time the boot heel met polished concrete. The clicking drew glances. So did the scar, a pale rope beginning high on her cheekbone, slipping past the corner of her mouth and disappearing beneath her collar. Some customers looked once and turned away. A few let their eyes linger, curiosity curdling into something that felt like pity. Inside Lone Star was air-conditioned to corporate perfection, fluorescent panels banished shadow, and everything smelled faintly of solvent and money. High on the far wall, a mosaic of framed photographs showed glossy men and women posing with competition rifles, smiles as bright as the trophies they held. Down the main corridor, 4 parallel ranges spread like the spokes of a star: basic, tactical, long gun, and elite. That door bore a brass plaque engraved with members and invites only. Emma bypassed the wall of honor and headed for reception. The marble counter rose high enough that she had to tilt her chin to meet the eyes of the woman behind it, a blonde in a navy polo with the range logo stitched in scarlet. "Can I help you?" the receptionist asked, voice cheerful but skimming the surface of courtesy. Emma slid a day pass envelope across the counter. "I have a guest credential." Polished nails flipped the envelope open. The receptionist's gaze darted from the worn card to the woman holding it, then down her clothes, then to the brace. Something passed, judgment wearing a smile. She tapped the keyboard, waited for a file to load, and sighed. "Range A7. She gestured vaguely left. "New shooter bay. All the way at the end. If the noise bothers you, benches are behind the safety line." Behind Emma, a trio of men in moisture-wicking tees and ballistic sunglasses gathered, waiting to sign in. One let out a low whistle. "Lost your way, ma'am?" he asked, loud enough for the foyer to hear. "VA Clinics 2 exits west." The others snickered. Emma's hand tightened on the tote strap, but she said nothing. She thanked the receptionist, turned, and set off down the corridor. Boot. Brace. Click. Laughter followed for 3 steps, then dissolved into murmurs. Halfway to A7, she passed the glass wall of the elite bay. Inside, shooters in fitted jerseys worked semi-automatic rifles through rhythm drills. Bang clack, with spotters timing each shot on digital tablets. The man at the nearest lane was tall, broad-shouldered, his blonde hair damp against his temple. The embroidered name on his collar read B. Radcliffe. 5-time state champion Blake Radcliffe wiped sweat from his brow, caught the movement in peripheral vision, and looked up. The woman outside the glass barely reached his shoulders, but something about the way she carried herself, alert despite the limp, held his attention for a full second longer than courtesy required. He turned back to his rifle, finished the magazine, and laid the weapon down. Shooters on either side congratulated him on a tight cluster. Blake responded with practiced modesty, but the curiosity needled him. He unlaced his hearing protection, stepped out of the bay, and fell into stride behind his friends as they headed for the basic range to cool down. A7 occupied the far corner, 10 narrow lanes, mechanical target carriers whining under fluorescent tubes that buzzed in protest at the heat. Most weekday shooters skipped it for the flashier tactical bay, so only 2 stations were occupied, until Emma placed her tote on the last bench. She unzipped the canvas and produced a Glock 9. The polymer frame was holster-worn, its slide mottled where the finish had faded. For a moment she simply held it, thumb brushing the slide's serrations as though reacquainting herself with an old voice. Then she slotted a magazine home, racked the slide, and pressed the barrel toward the concrete floor. A ripple of derision skittered down the line. Grandma brought her pea shooter. Someone laughed. I'll give her points for courage, another added. Takes guts to embarrass yourself in public. Their mockery broke like foam when Blake and his entourage strolled in. He clocked the Glock, the tote, the brace, and smiled the smile he saved for reporters. Morning, Sergeant. He pronounced the honorific as though it were a quaint anachronism. Came to relive the glory day. Emma set ears and eyes, racked the slide again to double-check chambering, and said nothing. Blake rested folded arms on the divider, voice pitched to Carrie. Tell you what, 50 yards to the bull. One shot. You make it clean, I write a check for 10 grand. Miss, you take your day pass and spend it watching. A low ooh rose from neighboring booths. Phones appeared. Live streams booted up. Emma's gaze dropped to her left hand. A plain gold band gleamed softly against scarred skin. She twisted it once, felt the familiar rasp of inscription hidden inside. When she looked up, her eyes were steady. No commentary. Blake prompted. Come on. And I thought Marines loved speeches. She stepped to the firing line. Target at 50 yards glided down range. A fresh silhouette bright under range light. Emma planted her feet left-angled forward right back, distributing weight to compensate for the brace. She raised the Glock, elbows unlocking until her shoulders settled. The range fell into hush. Breath in, knees unlock. Sight picture. Breath half out. Pause. Trigger press. The shot cracked, brittle as a snapped twig. The target motor hummed, drawing paper home. Every head tilted, necklaces of sweat cooled on collars. The silhouette arrived and someone gasped. A single hole beneath the tiny red X at absolute center. For a heartbeat nobody spoke. Then the hush shattered. Blind luck. He must have laser sights. But Blake said nothing. He approached the paper, inspected the tier and frowned. No keyhole, no tear out. Clean entry. He pivoted to Emma. Double or nothing, he called. 3 rounds, 75 yards, 50,000 to your favorite charity if you do it again. If you blow it, doors that way, and you don't come back. Onlookers cheered the escalation. Emma's thumb released the mag, slid it into a pouch. She slotted a fresh one. Again she paused to adjust grip, rolled her shoulders free of tension. She did not ask how much time she had. Combat had never offered timers. First round, by the second, by the third. When the target returned, the 3 holes overlapped so closely they carved a clover leaf at dead center. The line erupted. Disbelief, awe, a few reluctant whistles. The receptionist who'd checked Emma in hovered near the door, eyes wide enough to reflect muzzle flashes that had already cooled. Blake's grin calcified. He cleared his throat, managing a thin laugh. Guess we've got ourselves a story, he said, though his gaze held the hard glitter of someone confronted with an equation that would not balance. Emma engaged the slide lock, laid the Glock on the bench, and spoke for the first time since entering the bay. I served, she said, nothing more, yet the simplicity carried weight. A statement, a boundary perhaps. A warning. Someone in the crowd murmured, she's competition class dude, maybe military. Blake didn't move. Behind his eyes, calculations churned. Pride clawed at him like an unbroken horse. The champion inside demanded restoration. But beneath that a sliver of unease whispered that this limp, scarred stranger had just redrawn the map of his domain. Emma returned the pistol to its tote, took the paper target and propped it on the rack. The perfect cloverleaf stared back like a small, unblinking eye. As she limped toward the exit, floor tiles clicked under the brace. A sound now measured, deliberate, the cadence of someone who knew exactly how far she would go and why. In her wake, silence pooled, thick as oil. And in that silence, Blake Radcliffe felt the first hairline crack run through the marble of his certainty. And that was only the first shot. The instant Emma's elbows settled and her thumbs aligned along the glocked frame, the concrete walls of Lone Star blurred into a shimmering rooftop. Half a world away, she could smell talcum dry dust and the sour tang of cordite. She could feel broken brick grit beneath her knee pads and a dozen heartbeats hammering on the radio net. Across that ruined roof in Helmand Province, 8 years and 10,000 miles removed, Sergeant Daniel Cole crouched at her. His breath moved against her. Deep in, he whispered, the way he always did when they had seconds to spare. Don't squeeze because you're scared. Squeeze because you already know. The memory lodged between 2 heartbeats then receded. but it opened a door she had tried to weld. Helmand, 2014, Patrol Base Delta 9 squatted in the dust like a rusted anchor, its HESCO walls rattling each dawn beneath outgoing artillery. Emma had arrived with 3rd Marine Division as a designated marksman, steady-handed, tight-lipped, an introvert who let a rifle speak for her. Daniel commanded a 6-man reconnaissance team attached to the same battle space. The first time their call signs crossed, Razor for him, Widow for her, was during a midnight exfil of an Afghan interpreter pinned inside a walled compound. Emma's Overwatch rounds had chased 3 insurgents from a breach long enough for Daniel's team to drag the interpreter out alive. Over the tac net, he'd murmured, appreciated the timing, Widow, and she had answered with the 2 words that passed for a smile in her vocabulary, just work. 3 missions later, they were a 2-part machine. She learned the cadence of his footfalls, the rhythm of his hand signals. He learned the brief language of her breathing when she settled behind a scope. In the chow tent, he spoke softly, asked questions, listened. Amid the riot of jokes and boastful stories, his restraint was an island where she could moor a weary mind. After a month, he pressed a thumb-sized silver ring into her palm, unit crest on the inside, and said, "If we're both alive after this rotation, marry me." No parade, no champagne, just the 2 signatures. She closed her fingers around the metal, already knowing the answer. Fate granted them a single rain-soaked week of leave stateside. At Fort Hood on a Tuesday nobody will ever mark on an anniversary card. They exchanged vows in the office of a bored justice of the peace. No flowers, no family, only the smell of wet asphalt drifting through a cracked window. They spent their wedding night in a base motel, listening to thunder roll across Texas, and wondering which parts of themselves would still exist 6 months downrange. The ring rode a chain beneath Emma's camo blouse when they flew back into the war. The war did what wars do. It called in favors it never promised. 1 week into the next deployment, a British platoon was cut off near Salim Pass. Daniel's recon team got the tasking, slipped through, guide them out. Protocol said Emma should remain at the OP, but she signed onto the chalk without hesitation. First time she'd bent a rule for anything except mission necessity, and the necessity was Daniel. They found the Brits and began the crawl back, but the road had already been salt. When the lead Humvee's tires rolled over a buried pressure plate, the desert turned inside out. Emma remembered the shriek of tearing steel, Daniel's arm hammering into her chest, the ground vanishing. She woke on her back half deaf, staring at a sky flaring white with burning diesel. Kendall knelt beside the wreck's rear tire, one hand extended toward her. Then the secondary device punched through the undercarriage, and the image froze forever. Body flung wide, palms still open. The last look he gave her, equal parts command and apology. Olin Ramstein wrapped the rest of the story in morphine haze. Shredded tendons in her calf, neuro damage that would leave her foot half numb, flash burns across the left cheek. She asked only once about Daniel, and the nurse's silence supplied the answer. A week later, an officer she'd never met placed a neatly folded flag in her hands, and called her Mrs. Cole, as though saying it could backfill the space his body had left behind. Inside the footlocker, returned with her duffel, lay an envelope creased and smudged with Afghan clay. The note was short: "If I don't make it home, live 2 lives, yours and the one I ran out of. Shoot when you must, stand when you can, fight only for what matters, not for me, for you." Tributes followed, articles, ceremony invites, a posthumous Bronze Star. Emma declined them all. She mustered out quietly. No retirement speech, no comfort dog program, no interviews. She drove south until the road signs read Austin next 3 exits, and rented a 1-bedroom apartment where the cicadas sang as loud as artillery, but never sent anyone home in pieces. 3 years bled past at the pace of paperwork. She filed documentation for veterans who could still face crowds. She ate microwave dinners. She left the apartment only for work, physical therapy, and the weekly grocery run. On her dresser sat a sealed wooden box. Inside the letter, the silver ring and a Glock 19 wrapped in oiled cloth. The pistol Daniel had purchased after their courthouse wedding because, he joked, every marriage needs at least one reliable sidearm. She never unwrapped it. The box became both tomb and shrine. Sleep came in jagged span. Some nights she dreamed of Daniel standing at the foot of the bed, quotation marks of dusk drifting from his uniform. She would wake damp-faced, heartbeat galloping, reach for a present that evaporated with the dream. Morning always found her alone, the scar on her cheek a pale strike of reminder in the mirror. Then came the package, brown paper, no return address. Inside lay a single day pass to Lone Star Precision Range, and a scrap of note paper, scrawled in pen, that still smelled of sea. He used to brag about you, Em, said you never pulled the trigger to kill, only to finish what has to be finished. 3 years is long enough to stay silent. Come shoot, not for the war, for yourself. Mike Reeves. Her fingers rested on the card until they numbed. That night she laid the wooden box on the floor, snapped the brass latch, and peeled back the oiled cloth. The Glock surfaces were slick but unblemished, as though time had detoured around it out of respect. She racked the slide. It cycled with the crisp inevitability of a clock striking noon. The ring she wore on a chain now transferred to her ring finger, a small ceremony witnessed only by the hush of the apartment. Back in the present, fluorescent lights hummed over lane A7. Emma's pulse hammered against the inside of her ears, but the muscles remembered. Front sight, rear sight, equal height, equal light. Daniel's voice hovered like radio static just beyond hearing. Don't shoot angry. Shoot because you've survived long enough to owe the world no explanations. Her fingers settled on the trigger. The past folded neatly into the space between beats of her heart. And when the break came, tiny glass-like, the bullet traveled forward, carrying the weight of every mile she had crawled out from under. She did not watch it fly. She had never needed to. The air inside Lone Star felt thick enough to chew. No one spoke, but the silence pulsed with unsaid things, the kind that make wrists itch and jaws lock. Blake Radcliffe listened to his own heartbeat pound against the foam of his ear protection, and realized with a sudden flash of heat that every set of eyes in the basic bay was no longer on him. They were on her. The scarred woman still hovered behind the firing line. Glock lowered, expression unreadable. One flawless hole bloomed at dead center on the returning target. It mocked him. That hole, small, perfect, absolute. His world was trophies, group photos, the reliable roar of a crowd that knew who the star was. Now even the fluorescent lights seemed to lean toward her. Blake lifted his chin, let a dry laugh escape, and broke the hutch-like glass. One shot, folks, he called, swinging his attention toward the dozen phones already recording. Luck's a charming thing, but 3 shots from 7, that might be worth a bet. A few onlookers chuckled, eager to have the tension translated back into entertainment. Blake reached into his sport jacket and produced a leather checkbook. With theatrical flair, he flipped it open and scratched out a figure, $50,000, 0 cents, signing his name in a flourish large enough for the front row smartphones to capture. He tore the slip free, waved it like a flag. 50 grand, he announced. Money says lightning doesn't strike thrice. A ripple traveled through the crowd, half disbelief, half delighted greed. Emma remained motionless, gaze fixed somewhere between Blake's bravado and the target carrier whining back into place. After a heartbeat, she spoke, voice low but clear enough to travel the length of the bay. I don't shoot for money, she said, but if you want proof, make the check to the Veterans Recovery Fund. Her words were soft, yet they carried a solidity that made Blake's grin tighten round the edges. Still, he nodded with a shrug that implied magnanimity. Fine by me. It'll come home to roost soon enough. Phones switched to video mode en masse. Spectators fanned into a half circle, their earlier laughter dropping to a reverent hush. Someone slid fresh paper onto lane A7's carrier and keyed 75 yards into the console. Motor belts were. The target rolled into the dim far end of the range until it hovered in the dusty light like a ghost. Emma swapped magazines, thumbed the slide release and lifted the Glock. Every movement was unhurried, yet economic, gravity's path plotted in advance. She exhaled, shoulders settling as if each vertebrae clicked into a predetermined notch. At 60 feet, the air conditioning vent rattled. A thread of cool air cut across her cheek. She did not blink. First shot, a sharp bark. The muzzle flip barely nudged her wrist. In the distant gloom, the paper quivered. Second shot, a twin of the first, the crack superimposed so precisely on the former that some listeners thought the gun had misfired. Third shot, a final punctuation mark. The slide locked to the rear. Emma lowered the weapon and stepped off the line. The target trundled home through the smell of burnt powder. When it reached arm's length, Rebecca Johnson, range manager, flak vest, neat, hair knotted tight, leaned in. 3 holes, 1 ragged coin of emptiness, stared back. She drew a breath, then raised her voice so the phones would capture her clearly. All 3 rounds within the X-ring. The grouping is effectively 1 hole. Applause began, hesitant, then gathering momentum until it crashed over the bays like surf. Blake's friends clapped half-heartedly. A few slipped away toward the lockers. Blake folded his arms, the check curling in his fist, until the paper creaked. "That's impressive," he managed. His smile was no longer a smile. It was a set of teeth displayed for want of a better answer. Emma inclined her head once, the courtesy of a soldier, acknowledging another professionally cleared his throat. "All right," he said, voice amplified by adrenaline. "If you're truly that good, let's raise the bar out of the carnival booth." "I served cross-team with your husband in Baghdad," Wilson said. "He saved my radio when a stairwell collapsed. We swapped war stories, argued baseball. He couldn't shut up about you." Emma's throat tightened, but her voice remained steady. "Why are you here, Commander?" Wilson's gaze drifted to the pitted targets behind her, then back. "Word is you've got a match in 6 days. Word is Radcliffe's stacking the deck." He took a breath. "I figured Daniel wouldn't let his shooter walk into an ambush alone." She studied him for a long, quiet moment. Sunset painted rust over the cliffs. Cicadas started their evening chant. Finally, she stepped aside, gesturing toward the porch chair. "I have coffee that tastes like motor oil," she said. "Hope you're not picky." Wilson smiled. A small up-curve, nothing triumphant man. After Kandahar, Chow Hall's motor oil would be an upgrade. They sat. He laid the photograph on the railing between them like a passport, a proof of shared geography. Emma traced Daniel's outline with a thumb. For the first time since the range incident, the knot behind her lungs loosened half a turn. Night fell early under Red Rock's cliff shadow. As the stars ignited, Emma walked the dirt lane with Wilson, explaining distances, wind patterns, the soft spots in the backstop where decades of bullets had tunneled deep. He listened, occasionally nodding, occasionally correcting her mathematics with the dry patience of a former sniper chief. At the far bench, he picked up her Glock, proffered it grip first. "May I?" She nodded. Wilson sighted down the slide, fired an imaginary round and grunted approval. "Trigger disciplines, muscle memory, won't fail you." Setting the pistol down, he turned to her with an expression equal parts stern and paternal. "But Radcliffe's moving the fight to long guns. Rumor says Macmillan take 338 at the final station like an artillery, not sidearm." "I know," Emma said. "Then you also know a misdialed scope or a loose rail will toss you a foot off at 800. She met his gaze. "I expect sabotage," Wilson exhaled, fogging the cool desert air. "Then you'll need redundancy, backup data that exists only up here." He tapped his temp. From a cargo pocket he produced a small field notebook, edges worn silver. Dan kept wind charts everywhere he deployed. "I copied his Hellman formulas. Different altitude, but the trigonometry's gold." He placed the book in her palm. "Yours if you'll have it." Moonlight silvered the page edges. Emma closed her fingers around the gift. "You came a long way to hand this over," she murmured. "Didn't have far to travel," he answered. "I carry that picture in my wallet." "Been carrying the debt longer." He pulled a battered dog tag from his shirt pocket. "Or let it glint." "He swapped with me the day we rotated home. Said he had backup tags. I think he just wanted to leave me something that mattered." Silence stretched between them, brighter and clearer than speech. Finally Emma spoke, words soft but iron-edged. "I won't fight beside you in Baghdad, Commander. But if you stand behind the firing line next week, that'll be enough. I'll be there." He extended a hand. She shook it. The handshake brief, bone deep. The way people who have heard artillery introduce themselves without words. By the time Wilson's taillights dwindled into night, Emma sat again on the porch steps. The new notebook balanced on her knees. She opened to the first page. Daniel's handwriting blocky and soldier neat. Wind 7N, left to right. Adjust 0.4 millimeters. Trust the gut that pulls the trigger, not the fear that freezes the wrist. She smiled, thin, involuntary, then tucked the notebook inside the battered tote beside her husband's ring. and the weapon that had started a story the world was still rewriting. From the distant highway came the hum of 18-wheelers like a far-off convoy rolling through time. In Austin, Blake Radcliffe stood alone in his condo's silent kitchen, tablet glowing with fresh comments. "She's a Marine champ. Get ready to eat humble pie." With a vicious swipe he closed the feed. The city lights below twinkled like targeting recals. Hundreds of little judgments aimed his way. For the first time in years, the champion felt something colder than competition biting the back of his tongue. 6 days. The number drummed with every heartbeat. 6 days to turn panic into strategy. 6 days to pry apart a legend built on war stories and grief. He poured another whiskey, but the liquor tasted like sand. Far to the west, in the small cabin haloed by moonlight, Emma set an alarm. Her final thought before sleep was neither of fear nor of victory, but of a rooftop in Helmand, and a voice that had always sounded sure, even when the world cracked open beneath them. Deep breath. Don't squeeze because you're scared. Squeeze because you've already seen the finish line. The dawn wind over Red Rock Range smelled of creosote and iron, the desert's own brand of gun oil. Emma rose with a tint of cobalt on the horizon, loosed her brace and started jogging the perimeter trail. Each drag step sent a jolt through damaged nerve endings, but she counted the pain the way recruits count cadence. A rhythm that proved she was still in motion. 1 mile, then another. By the time sun spilled across the mesa, sweat darkened her Marine-issued t-shirt in the shape of a vest. She grabbed 20 push-ups against the splintered porch rail, rolled to her back for sit-ups. 30 pause, 30 more, then limped toward the firing line. The private range was little more than railroad ties and beaten earth, but distance markers had been hammered in at neat intervals. 20, all the way to a steel gong crouched half a football field shy of the canyon wall. She unpacked ammunition in Daniel's notebook, its dog-eared pages soft from fingertip grease and Afghan dust. Across the top margin of page 3, a faded line read, "Wind 3F, right to left, 90 df. Humidity 10%, hold 15, low 25 left." She traced the numbers with her thumbnail, then laid the book open on the bench like scripture. Routine dictated 3 strings: prone, kneeling, standing. She cycled magazines through the Glock, then bridged to an AR-15 she had borrowed from the shop in town. Recoil, bolt, lock, reload, safety on. After each volley she walked the range, heel brace click. She spoke none of it aloud. All conversation took place in the echo chamber of memory, where Daniel still leaned at her shoulder, lazy grin under dust goggles. 1/4 inch low, she heard him remark, and she would shift her elbows or exhale longer, obeying a voice no one else could hear. By noon, heat waves shimmered from the barrel. She field stripped the Glock, wiped carbon with a rag already stained like camouflage, and left it open to cool, while she stretched tight hip flexors against a boulder. If fatigue whispered quit, she answered with Daniel's handwriting. "Day you stop trimming excuses is the day you grow accuracy." The pickup rattled into view late afternoon, tires grinding limestone. Emma recognized the silhouette before she saw the driver, Mike Reeves, his posture permanently half-cocked as though wearing an invisible pack. He hopped from the cab holding a cardboard drink tray in a paper sack, radiating the smell of brisket. "Well, hell," he called. "Looked like you've domesticated this patch of nowhere." Emma wiped palms on her jeans and met him at the steps. "I'd offer coffee, but I suspect yours is better." "It's barely coffee," he admitted, handing her a cup, more like caffeine-flavored mud. "Figured you earned it." They ate on the porch, boots propped on the rail. Beyond the range, the desert fell silent but for cicadas counting down daylight. Mike chewed brisket, swallowed and studied her profile. Oscar, ponytail, eyes fixed on some thought half a mile away. "I'll be honest," he said, "back in Helmand, I figured Daniel was romanticizing when he bragged you could outshoot half the platoon. Thought he was, you know, being a husband." Emma's lips twitched, almost a smile. "He tended to exaggerate. Turns out he undersold." Mike set his cup aside. 3 rounds in 1 hole. Lone Star folks are still screaming cheat codes. "I'm not replacing him, Mike." Her gaze stayed on the range. "I'm just keeping a promise." He nodded, respect threaded with grief. "Most people barely stand after what you took. You're not just standing, you're taking on Texas's loudest ego." From a jacket pocket he produced a square of faded canvas, stitched around the edges. "Found this in my sock drawer. Remember it?" She did. The rifle cheek piece Daniel had used on his M40. Initials DOAS, embroidered in one corner by a core spouse who ran a side hustle out of a chew. Emma's fingers closed on the cloth. She brought it to her cheek and breathed in powder no laundering could erase. Mike wrote, "I'll be in the bleachers come game day," he said. "Bring that attitude and the ghost cloth. The rest will follow." She watched his taillights ribbon through the chaparral until dusk swallowed them. Then she returned to the bench, laid the cheek piece beside the notebook and resumed drills beneath a sun dropping like a shell casing into the far hills. Night cooled the boards under her feet when the phone vibrated. Rebel flashed across the cracked screen. "Evening," Emma answered, voice low to keep the desert dark intact. Rebecca skipped pleasantries. Radcliffe strong-armed the board. She said, "Scoring's changed. Station 10 worth 30%. His pick. Macmillan tack 3. Emma glanced at the open notebook. Page 21. Daniel's ballistic tables for .38. Lapoa. Almost like he'd anticipated the conversation. "He wants long range," she said. "Let him have it. You can protest, Emma. Statute allows 24-hour grievance filing." "No," she traced a figure of 8 on the wood with her thumb. "Metal is metal. Only the finger matters." Rebecca sighed, frustration fanning through the speaker. "I'd at least demand independent tech checks. He's already tried one stunt." "Appreciated." Emma flipped to Daniel's scrawl. Wind 7 amp left, 0.3 elevation. Patience greater than muscle. She felt something settle in her ribcage. A click like bolt into lug. "See you on the line." When the call ended, the range lay white beneath moonlight. She loaded a single .338 dummy round into a snap-cap rifle borrowed from Wilson. Pressed cheek to stock atop the ghost cloth and stared down an unlit target she could sense more than see. "If you can't shoot first," Daniel had written, "shoot straighter." On her last night at Red Rock, she walked the lanes one final time. Cane of starlight guiding each step. Empty wooden silhouettes leaned against berms like tired sentries. She stopped at the 50-yard mark, planted feet and breathed desert into lungs. Notebook open on the ground, she reread a margin note he'd scribbled during a rare lull in Farah. "Wind by patience when strength runs out." She closed the cover and laid the stitched cheat piece atop it. Wind stirred the cloth just enough to flutter the letters GHOST. "Tomorrow," she whispered. "We finish your half of the walk." Packing took minutes. 1 Glock, Daniel's book, the cloth, the ring. Objects that looked small and unimpressive but weighed more than any rifle. She slid everything into the canvas tote and propped it by the door. Boots aligned beneath. Inside Blake Radcliffe's downtown condominium, lights of the skyline glittered like tracer. A junior associate from the range board had just emailed confirmation. Opponent accepts revive scoring, no protest filed. Blake's laugh came out as a hit. "Too confident," he muttered, refreshing the page that counted video views now past 3 million. "Or too stupid." He reopened the viral clip, volume muted. At the third shot, he slammed the laptop shut. The image searing behind his eyelids, a limp, a scar, and absolute certainty on a stranger's face. Pouring another 2 fingers of whiskey, he found it tasted like the coppery edge of panic. Dawn crept rosy over the cabin rafters. Emma sat on her cot, boots lacy, tote ready. No wind creaked the eaves. The desert held its breath. She felt the quick step of her heart, then slowed it with a count 1, 2. Hold, just as Daniel used to do behind a scope. Across Texas, stadium lights would soon blaze over Lone Star. Cameras crowding for a glimpse of controversy or redemption. Comment feeds would foam with predictions and invective. None of it would cross the threshold of her focus. She rose, thumb rubbing the wedding band. "We go together," she told the quiet room. Outside, the first bird call split the H. When she drove out, dust whirled behind her tires but quickly fell back to earth, leaving the range silent as before, except for footprints, brass casings, and a subtle straightening of the old wooden silhouettes, as though even they understood the world might need to stand a little taller before the day was through. The sky above Austin had the hard, flawless blue of baked porcelain. Inside Lone Star Precision Range, that sky might as well have been a movie screen. Every watt of electricity, every bolt of rigging, every rented drone and broadcast truck hummed toward one purpose: turning a local gun club into a coliseum. Banners the length of billboards hung from ceiling trusses. Co-Leaf, Radcliffe, The Duel, telescoping platforms cradled camera crews. Bleachers erected overnight, groaned under the weight of veterans in ribboned dress uniforms. Corporate sponsors in canvas influencers in branded caps, angling for the best live stream angle. A state senator shook hands with the CEO of a suppressor company, while 2 rows behind, 3 former SEALs in civilian jackets quietly scanned exits. At 9:30 horizon, the public address system flared. Ladies and gentlemen, today you will witness 10 unique challenges and 2 exceptional marksmen. Please take your seats. Spectators performed a kind of collective exhale. On a lower concourse, Emma Cole paused before the tunnel leading to the competition floor. She wore a pale blue shirt, jeans and boots, buffed only where leather met gas pedal. The limp in her left leg was more pronounced after a week of 6-hour training blocks. Yet she neither hid nor highlighted it. A canvas tote rode her left shoulder. Daniel's notebook peeked from the opening like a passport. Behind her, a reporter muttered into a mic. "She doesn't look like a champion. She looks like someone running errands." Mike Reeves, standing at the rail, heard it and snorted. His eyes met Emma's just long enough for a nod that said steady seas. She returned the nod. It was all the inventory she required of encouragement. On the opposite side of the arena, a black SUV rolled to a stop and disgorged Blake Radcliffe. Amid an entourage worth 5 commas in sponsorship deals, he wore a tailored shooting jacket stitched with the crests of companies that had wagered deeply on his aura of inevitability. Gold mirror sunglasses reflected 100 camera lenses. When he smiled, reporters he posed with a pair of junior shooters for a fast social media hit, autographed a silicone earplug case thrust at him by a fan, then strode onto the floor, as though red carpets had been invented for days exactly like this. A ring of LED pillars displayed the rules in towering letters. 1 10 stations, 10 weapons, 10 cartridges, 2 park time posted at each lane, 3 target scored on accuracy first, time second, 4 station 10 equals 30% of aggregate, 5 all firearms provided by Lone Star. RS may inspect on request. Beneath that list, the firearms rotated like menu items. Glock 19, Colt 1911, Remington 80 Dolden 970, M4 Carbine Scar L, AR-10, SIG P226, Winchester 70, Mossberg MVP, Macmillan TAC 33. The last state highlighted 3 seconds longer than any other. Remington's marketing people had paid for that flourish. Emma's expression did not flicker. Blake's grin sharpened. The TAC 3 M38 was his home field. Station 1, Glock 19, pistols, 15 yards. Blake opened the day with a flawless string. 5 shots inside the X-ring. Reload under 2 seconds. Part-time crush. Scoreboard 50/50. Emma's Glock looked older. Its slide worn to steel in places, but our checks had passed it. She pressed 5 rounds into paper with no flourish. The jumbo drum showed another perfect. What should have been routine opener became a proclamation. "I will not lag." Station 2, Colt 1911, 45 ACP, 25 yards. Blake's sights aligned like geometry. He posted 48. Emma matched it despite a magazine with an oddly sticky follower that cost her half a second. Score 48, difference, 0 in the first row sponsor box. A marketing exec whispered, "This is good TV, but he'll pull away by mid-match." Station 3, Remington 870, 12K, rising clays. Blake shattered all 5 birds and spun the pump for the camera flash. The roar was part applause, part relief from his support. Emma's AT-70 jammed on shell 3. Action bar sluggish. A little too dry. She racked once, twice. Cleared the failure. Nailed bird 4 and 5 without blinking. Score 48. Crowd murmured sabotage, skill. 4 and 5. Men 4 and Scar Lel. Carbines 100 yards kneeling/sitting. Here Blake opened a lead. His transitions were buttery. The Scar's muzzle brake spat flame in crisp rhythm. He notched 49 and 50. Emma's groups ran a fraction wider. The scoreboard edged to Blake 2047, Emma 2039. Somewhere in the press row a podcaster tweeted, Radcliffe back in command. Order restoring. The retweets were swift and premature. Station 6, AR-10 7.62, 300 yards prone. Crosswings toyed with bullet flight. Emma read the mirage correctly. Blake overcorrected on his final shot and dropped a point. Emma posted a pure 50. The gap shrank to 4. Veterans in the VIP seats exchanged low commentary. She's making a slow drag through his confidence. Station 7, SIG P242, 26 yards, timed cadence. Emma's SIG arrived with a gritty double action pull. She took one extra beat, accepted the reset wall, and ran 5 in an overlapping string that earned 49. Blake hit 50, but spent an extra half second settling on his 4th shot. The scoreboard difference, Blake by 3. The champ started in pockets, soft, almost embarrassed. Emma. Mike Reeves didn't join. He simply tightened crossed arms and waited. Station 8, Winchester Model 70, bolt action, 400 yards, unsupported standing. Wings flag snapped. Blake's first shot punched the 9 ring and his lips compressed. He corrected, landed the remaining 10. Emma came online, lifted the heavy rifle, and drew a breath so slow it vanished into the arena noise. All 5 of hers kissed the X or its scene. Tie game. Media row erupted into frantic rewrites. Underdog pulls even. Station 9, Mossberg MVP. Bolt action, 500 yards barricade. The penultimate challenge. Blake's rifle ran smooth, so did his nerves mostly. He fired 5, 4 tens, and a strong 9. Score 49. Emma approached her rifle and felt the barricade tremble under her palm. Someone had loosened the forward leg. The wooden support wobbled. She shifted stance, loaded weight through her good leg, and fired 5 unhurried shots, 4 tens. A final breath. 5th round 9. Scoreboard flashed. Aggregate Blake 87-2. The roof could have lifted on the sound. Half the arena stood. The other half forgot to breathe. Even Blake's sponsors cheered. Drama sells. But Blake himself, his grin had evaporated, replaced by a tight line and eyes that glittered like brass, left too long in the tumbler. The announcer's voice cracked slightly with enthusiasm, and after 9 grueling stations, the competitors are tied. We now enter a mandatory 5-minute equipment check. Before Station 10, the long-range Macmillan Challenge. Applause rolled, then ebbed into restless chat. Emma wiped grime from her palms onto jeans and limped to a water cooler behind the media barricade. Camera booms followed, hungry for any micro-expression. She ignored them, drank, then rested her back against a stanchion to save her leg. From her tote, she pulled Daniel's notebook. The spine creaked. A gust from the AC flipped it open to the Lapua page as though guided. Wind 57, math left, hold .4, mil. Watch mirage more than flags. She ran her index finger along the margin where Daniel had doodled a ghost cartoon saluting. A laugh caught at the back of her throat, surprise at the mundane intimacy of the drawing amid serious numbers. Across the court, Blake's tech team hovered around his Macmillan on a padded rest. A lens cloth buffed the scope, torque wrenches clicked over action screws. Blake himself paced small circles, mouth moving. A sponsor tried to pat his shoulder, he shrugged it off. On the jumbotron, a split screen displayed both benches. Serenity versus friction. Commentators filled dead air with speculation. If you're Radcliffe, you love the Tech 3-3. He's run that rifle in half a dozen PRS meets. Sure, Dan, but Cole's proven she adapts under sabotage. Remember the 8-7? We've never seen her behind a Doc 338 sniper rig on paper. This last stage is a leap into darkness. In row 3, one of Daniel's old SEAL teammates leaned toward Mike. She's running his wind chart, isn't she? Mike's answer was a slow smile. She's running his wind chart and his backbone. A klaxon sounded. 2 minutes to station call. Staffers hustled water bottles and ear prog cleared media from the shooting lanes. Rebecca Johnson skirted the edge of the cordon and reached Emma just as the tote strap went over her shoulder. Rebecca murmured, "Scope check passed, but it's club gear. Trust nothing." Emma nodded, "Copy." She paused, "Thank you for the warning." Rebecca hesitated, then blurted, "How's your leg? Do you need—" "Leg's mine," Emma said, not unkindly. She touched the ghost cloth folded in her pocket. "Pain means I'm still here." Overhead a countdown ticker appeared. 60 seconds/station 10 call. Audience members surged to their feet. The murmur coalesced into a drumming chant that filled the rafters with competing syllables. Lahiki, Lahiki, answered by Emma. Emma, force met counterforce. A storm chasing its own tail. Blake strode to the firing point, jaw squared. Emma followed the arrow to hers, cane-like limp, absorbing stadium energy but giving none back. They lay prone on parallel mats 20 feet apart, two silhouettes against a backdrop of digital brand logos. And beyond that, the long gray lane to a target so distant, it seemed painted on cloud. The announcer lifted his mic, but the roar drowned his first words, so the Jumbotron displayed them in text. Station 10, stop complete, shooters ready on the signal. Emma settled behind the bipod, pressed the ghost cloth to cheek weld, and watched heat shimmer above the barrel. She felt the notebook's weight against her ribs, the ring's cool circle on her finger, the hush of the entire range compressing into a single breath, yet to be released. Somewhere in the stands, a child's voice squeaked. Mom, who's gonna win? A pause, then the mother. The start buzzer had not yet sounded, but every soul present felt its approach like incoming ordnance, vibrating under skin and bone. Blake took one last sip from a metal flask, set it aside with fingers that shook just enough for superstition. Emma exhaled, found the half-breath space where pulse slowed to a laboring horse, and waited for the horn that would decide whether legends stand on podiums or on graves. And the horn not yet. A low klaxon pulsed overhead, one long tone and two dead even after 9. The play-by-play commentator intoned from a booth suspended above the crowd. If you're just joining us, Blake Radcliffe has met his match in an opponent no one scouted, no one sponsored, no one even believed in until last week. Blake is the product of a system, Lehigh coaches, factory tuning, years of podium rehearsals. Emma Cole, she is what happens when survival teaches its own curriculum. On the Jumbotron, a split screen showed each competitor prone behind a Macmillan TC-3. Stadium lights spilled off blue tarps that shielded spectators from muzzle blast. The illumination flattened faces into masks of anticipation. Veterans in the front row leaned forward, elbows on knees, sponsors clenched lanyards. Somewhere high in the stands, a teenager clasped his phone, streaming the moment to friends with shaking hands. Emma let the scene tunnel to a pinprick, sight picture, wind flags. The faint tang of burnt powder still lounging in her nostrils from the last volley. Those were everything else, even the stadium's roar, was background hum. She felt Daniel's notebook resting against her ribs like an extra plate of armor, and oddly the cheap comfort of the ghost cloth cushioning her cheek weld. Across the mat, Blake lifted a palm to hush the audience. A hush answered, rippling backward like wind across wheat. He glided a fingertip along the rifle's carbon chassis, an intimate gesture caught by every courtside camera. With a controlled inhale, he nodded to his spotter. The range officer slapped the shot timer. The first and then 38 LaPois round lanced out. Spotting scope flashed a red LED on the video board. X rang. The cheer rose and subsided almost instantly, replaced by a collective lean in. Shot 2, another 10. Shot 3, same. Blake's cadence was mechanical. Deep breath, fingertip on trigger shoe. Recoil absorbed down a straight line of bone and polymer. After shot 6, he paused to reset his sling tension. A textbook move, then relief. The 9th bullet kissed sacrifice to chaos, striking within the 10 ring but a sliver high right. Murmur. He steadied, exhaled the memory of that drift, and sent the final round straight through the center. The scoreboard lit. Station 1097. A Gregley, 98. Color returned to Blake's cheeks. Applause detonated in the bleachers. He rose carefully, setting the rifle down as though it were fragile glass. A sponsor rushed the rope line, shouting into a phone, "Tell graphics we keep." The tagline, "He's unbeatable." Blake permitted a tight smile, then turned toward Emma. The nearest boom mic caught his whisper. "Mind the recoil, Sergeant. That beast bites amateurs." Emma did not reply. She only reached into the canvas tote, drew out Daniel's battered notebook, and laid it on the firing mat next to the Macmillan. Then she lowered herself prone, legs stiffly obedient. She accepted a 10-round magazine from the inspected each cartridge, standard brass, no dimples that might hint at sabotage, and clicked it home. When she cycled the bolt, the action glided smooth. Good. Then she peered through the night force optic and caught an unexpected skew. Horizontal crosshair canted slightly left of true. Sabotage again, but subtler. A soft hand tweak, likely performed between inspection and showtime. At 800 yards, a half-mil offset could walk shots 3+ inches off bull. Enough to lose. She did not raise her hand or call foul. The clock hadn't started. Instead, she thumbed open Daniel's book to a page that smelled faintly of CLP and sand. Margin scroll in pencil. Unverified glass. Compensate. Don't complain. Wind LR46M. Emma matched her body to the formula. Sled left elbow forward. Adjusted bipod cant by a centimeter. Lowered the stock into her shoulder pocket. Flags halfway down the lane slanted right to left. At maybe 6 miles. Pirage shimmer corroborated. She dialed 1 click for elevation, none for trust the cheek pad against the embroidered cloth, and felt the bulk of Daniel's ring into her collarbone. Adses. The buzzer sang. First squeeze. Crisp sear. Muzzle climb damped by bipod. Legs dug into gravel. In the scope she caught a quiver of paper and a fragment of red LED on the jumbo. Second shot 10. Third 10. Somewhere after the fourth, a hush spilled across rows. People rose without deciding to, unable to watch from seated heights. The commentator's voice dropped to a whisper, so the illusion of communion wouldn't shatter. Every round is a breath, he murmured. She's timing on heartbeats. Fifth bullet slipped through the same ragged aperture. Sixth followed. Identical. The scoreboard pixels glowed 60/60, 70/70, 80/80. Until time felt like it was tracking her group size, shrinking with each trigger press. On shot 7, she felt sweat beat at her temple. She let it fall, resisting the urge to wipe her brow. 10 again. Shot 8, held an extra half count when a gust nudged flag tails horizontal, then let off. 10, 90 points. Shot 9 became a small universe. Emma rotated the wedding band with her free hand, and heard Daniel's voice like a breeze inside her skull. 9 brings them hope. 10 kills doubt. She chuckled. A breathy hiccup. Then fired. 10. Scoreboard. 99. 1 round remained. The jumbotron switched to a close-up of her face. Score silver under stadium lights. Eyes behind dark lenses. Steady on a spot no one else could see. She closed those eyes, inhaled the smell of hot metal, Persian dust, grass all braided into one timeline. She exhaled halfway, found the natural respiratory pause, and touched the trigger. The shot's crack seemed quieter than the rest. A whisper rather than a bang. It traveled 2,400 feet in under a second, spun 6.5 times per millisecond, and drilled the exact center of negative white space the 9 previous bullets had torn. When the target camera zoomed, viewers could see no new hole. Merely the existing one deepened into a darker void. For half a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then the scoreboard recalculated. Station 10, 100, a greatly added 90/71. Emma Cole +3. The arena detonated. Sound toppled outward like a wave hitting seawall. People who 30 minutes earlier had never heard her name now chanted it as if it were theirs to defend. Emma's chest tightened, not from adrenaline but from something denser. Relief shaped like On the VIP rail, a retired lieutenant general snapped his arm into a salute so sharp you could hear elbow fabric crack. The SEALs rose, hats over hearts. Mike Reeves let out a war whoop he hadn't voiced since a mortar scare near Sangen, and slammed palms with the teammate beside him. Emma stood slowly, knees complaining, and engaged the Macmillan safety. She gathered Daniel's notebook, folded the ghost cloth atop it, and cradled both against her sternum. Cameras jockeyed for close-ups, but she angled away, looking instead into rafters where dust spiraled in spotlight beams, like desert sand caught in a thermal. An announcer fought for clarity over the roar, "Ladies and gentlemen," with an unprecedented perfect close. Emma Cole posts 95-1 to Blake Radcliffe's 90-68. By 3 points, your new Lone Star Masters dual champion Sergeant Emma Cole. Blake remained at his mat, eyes stitched to the dirt. He flexed both hands, knuckles blanching, but applause drowned any spoken protest. When he finally stood, his face was waxy pale around mouth corners, dragged into a shape that only resembled a smile from certain angles. Sponsors who had leaned forward to claim victory moments earlier withdrew into their rows, unsure how much airtime their logos now enjoyed. Emma did not lift the trophy. There was none. Only a digital certificate on the scoreboard and a promised check for the Veterans Recovery Fund. She simply bowed her head. Microphones bobbed, desperate for a quote. She cleared her throat once and spoke at a conversational volume that nonetheless carried through the suddenly reverent Huck. "I told someone," she said, "that metal is just metal. What matters is the person behind the trigger." She glanced at Blake, an acknowledgement, not a taunt. Today, two people pressed triggers. One of them shot to keep a title, the other shot to keep a promise. Reporters scrawled promise in notebooks already thick with headlines. Blake stepped forward, face stiff. He extended a hand. Camera zoom. For a long moment, Emma stared at it, remembering the crack of glass tumbling in a bar in Afghanistan, when Daniel had once said, "Even enemies deserve their handshake, if the field was fair." She grasped Blake's hand, one shake, firm. When she released, he inhaled as if surfacing from deep water, nodded and backed away. A correspondent near the media rope whispered into a mic, "No one will ever call her lucky again. She's a Marine. She fired because she had to, and that's a language every warrior here speaks." The Jumbotron faded to sponsor credits, while sound tech struggled to keep audio meters below red line. In the east bleachers, a little girl on her father's shoulders waved a homemade sign, scrawled in crayon, "Silent shooter, loud hot." Emma noticed and lifted two fingers off the notebook in a V, shy acknowledgement that lit the child's face brighter than the Ellie's. Then she walked off the mat, no confetti cannons, no victory lap, just a limp through a corridor newly carved by respect. The notebook pressed warm against her ribs. The wedding band carried faint vibrations of applause. She whispered down to them both, "We did it," and the den fell away, replaced by rotor beats from 8 years ago, and a grin she still saw when skies went dust red for once. The memory did not, it steady. Behind her, Lone Star's scoreboard cycled to standby. Emma Cole, 90-71, top line, and paused there as though unwilling to scroll. Above it hung a banner. No breeze touched, but in the mind of every spectator it fluttered. Because a ghost had just walked off the range, leaving silence louder than any shot. Voices were still chanting "MA" when Blake Radcliffe strode back onto the dais, a handheld mic snatched from a stunned stagehand. The overhead lights painted his face the color of molten brass, and the stadium's jubilation faltered, as if someone had yanked a plug. "I reject these results," he declared, words clipping the air. "There is clear evidence of technical tampering with my rifle, and favorable adjustment of her." A hush rolled outward. Camera operators pivoted. Boom mics dipped to drink every syllable. Emma had barely stepped off the firing line. Now she paused, the corner of Daniel's notebook still tucked under her arm. Blake pointed at her with the microphone. "Explain the absurd precision. Explain the impossible grouping after 9 stations. Unless," he let the insinuation hang like the smell of cordite. Murmurs thickened. A few spectators glanced at each other, minds wobbling between awe and doubt. He paced 2 steps, momentum gathered. She and whoever assisted her recalibrated equipment, mid-match. No other hypothesis fits. The word hypothesis fits. The word weirdly clinical in the charged air, but his certainty did sway a handful of faces. Skeptics crave authority, and Blake had worn that suit for years. Phones rose. A freelance photojournalist zoomed in on the vein ticking at Blake's temple. The roar that had crowned Emma 5 minutes earlier slipped toward confusion. Then another figure climbed the steps. Rebecca Johnson, Lone Star's rangemaster, ponytail tight enough to whistle. She carried a tablet in both hands, like a legal summons. "Mr. Radcliffe," she said, voice pitched for the sound system, "if you allege fraud, club bylaws require evidentiary disclosure." Blake pivoted, emboldened. "Show everyone," he barked. "I welcome transparent." Rebecca plugged a cable into the backstage feed. The jumbo drum flickered from sponsor logos to a security camera angle. Timestamp 3:17 a.m., a meaning 3 days earlier. A slender man in a technician's vest, Lone Star's logo, paired with Blake's personal crest, entered the rifle vault. Night vision mode tinted everything green. The tech lifted the Macmillan TAC-33-8 from its cable, produced a pocket toolkit, and tweaked the Windows turret. He then popped the action, replaced the bolt with another wrapped in oilcloth, and backed out, locking the cage behind him. The clip looped twice. A ripple of recognition coursed through the bleachers. Rebecca spoke into that ripple. Motion sensors flagged the intrusion. The key card used belongs to Mr. Radcliffe's logistics chief, Martin Hauser. She tapped and a second clip materialized. Hauser handing the rifle to Blake's armorers on match morning. Emma never entered the frame. Rebecca faced the crowd. The rifle was tampered with, but exclusively to increase trigger pull and offset zero. The modifications disadvantaged Miss Cole, not Miss Radcliffe. Gasps. Then a brittle hush. A certified ballistics inspector stepped up, clearing his throat. Post-match teardown confirms those findings. Ms. Cole's first 5 impacts drifted left 3/4 MOA. Consistent with an optic, intentionally miss-zeroed. He glanced at Emma. She compensated in real time. No one fixed a rifle for her. For a heartbeat, Blake seemed to shrink inside his tailored jacket. Then he lurched toward the mic again. That proves nothing about her rifle. But the crowd had pivoted. Applause erupted, rather than swelling, funneling gratitude toward Emma and the woman who had just detonated Blake's credibility. Phones recorded the moment a champion's halo blackened to smoke. By late afternoon, the Texas Sports Shooting Supervisory Board released a terse statement. Effective immediately, all competitive titles held by Mr. Radcliffe are suspended pending investigation. Local news cut to a live feed of detectives exiting Lone Star with evidence boxes. Austin PD confirmed an inquiry into felony fraud. Wagers tied to a charitable pledge qualified the sabotage as criminal, not merely unsportsmanlike. Corporate emails flew faster than .338 rounds. Remington's press office issued a 3-sentence severance from their former brand ambassador. Vortex Optics wiped Blake's photo from its homepage. Hawk Fuel Energy Drink tweeted a gif of a vanishing logo in the caption. Integrity greater than hype. Cable anchors who, hours earlier, framed Blake as a hard-luck hero, now flipped the Chiron from golden boy to question mark. Social feeds birthed instant meme. Blake photoshopped with a magnifying glass, searching for excuses. Blake as the Titanic's orchestra playing while a Macmillan rifle sinks. Seen by Ego trended alongside Ghost Widow. One articulate veteran on a podcast put it bluntly, real shooters own their misses. Only amateurs blame Ghost. Downloads spiked. Red Rock Range felt even quieter than usual that night. The crickets, at least, carried on. Reporters had trailed Emma's pickup from the highway until a locked gate denied further pursuit. They milled outside in dusty sedans, battery lights blinking like hungry eyes. Inside the cabin, Emma ignored the crescendo of notification pings. She set the notebook on the table, unscrewed her canteen, and allowed silence to retake the room. The phone she did switch on contained 2 numbers in recent history, Mike Reeves and Commander Ray Wilson. She called Mike first. He answered on the second ring from some noisy bar where ex-service folk were apparently buying rounds in her honor. I wasn't trying to win, Emma said, voice low, a rasp from hours of ice air and adrenaline.
I know, he replied. You were trying to finish something. Here's more finishing left, she admitted. Blake will double down and whatever comes next, courtrooms, cameras. I didn't plan for that. She could almost hear him nod. Look, Emma, Mike said. Daniel used to say a bullet solves the moment, not the aftermath. The aftermath is our mess to clean. Good thing you've got a platoon full of folks ready to grab mops. She managed the smallest laugh. They exchanged a few more words. War zone, brevity preserved for peacetime confusion, then said goodnight. Her call to Ray Wilson was shorter still. Investigations rolling, he told her. Jag buddies think DA will press tampering plus wire fraud. I'm monitoring. Emma thanked him and added almost shyly, for the notebook. You filled in the margins, Wilson said. That part's yours now. She ended the call, folded the phone shut and slid Daniel's book into her jacket pocket. No tears followed. Triumph tasted iron flat. Vindication, even sweeter, carried the echo of rifle cracks and a husband's voice, telling her that breathing was the first victory. Outside, cicadas droned. She stepped onto the porch, letting the night air wrap around bruised shoulders. Headlights from reporters' vans cast moving shadows between cedar posts,
but none crossed the property line. She was a public miracle now. Yet this patch of earth and timber belonged to her, to Daniel, to the invisible company of every comrade who'd taught her that standing one more minute was a tactical objective. Somewhere beyond the floodlights, a coyote yipped at the half-moon. Emma answered with a whisper only wind could hear. Still here. Then she turned, shut the door against the world's chatter, and sat at the table to begin planning what came after bullets and headlines. A battle measured not in points, but in the long, stubborn act of living. Colonel James Harrison phoned on a rain-stained Wednesday, 1 week after the duel turned Texas sports coverage upside down. His voice was granite warm, the kind that made young lieutenants stand straighter even through bad reception. Sergeant Cole, I run Echo Company Foundation in Dallas. We help vets who came home with more ghosts than medals. Emma watched water bead on the Red Rock cabin window. What can I do for you, Colonel? We've seen crack shots before, but we haven't seen anyone fire the way you did to survive, not to score. We're launching a program called Marksmen for healing PTSD groups, amputees, the lost in transition crowd. They don't need a champion. They need someone who's still standing. Emma's gaze dropped to Daniel's notebook on the table, pages frayed like unfurled flags. His margin scroll floated up. If you make it through, teach somebody else how. She closed the cover. I'm no certified instructor, she told the colonel when they met 2 days later in a modest office that smelled of coffee and floor wax. No trophies, no teaching credential, just memory. Harrison nodded, stripes of silver at his temples catching light. Memories keep more men breathing than any textbook, Sergeant. Bring yours. We'll supply the earplugs. She signed the contract that afternoon, ink flowing steadier than her pulse. Echo Company's campus lay on the lip of a prairie outside Dallas. Low cinderblock buildings, a flagpole that clanked in the wind, a rifle berm backed by live oak scrub. Monday dawned mute and amber. Emma's first class gathered in the gravel lot. 6 veterans stitched together by scars and hesitation. 3 left arm gone to an RPG. Serena Fesh wristbands hiding failed suicide sutures. Dalton, recon scout who talked to shadows in REM sleep. They shuffled beneath the awning, expecting drills or worse, expertise. Emma led them onto dusty grass and let silence settle. I'm not here to teach you how to shoot, she said. I'm here to show you how to plant both feet again, even if one got left overseas. She tapped her brake. No one mistook the gesture for metaphor. Day 1 was breathwork, counting heartbeats, learning how ribs moved when fear loosened its hand. Day 2, she laid pistols on a table and ignored them for an hour, guiding fingers instead to the thrum of carotid arteries, so each student could feel the moments when a trigger should never be pulled. Only on day 3 did she place ear protection and let them load single round. The rule was simple: no target worth hitting until the rest of the world went quiet. After Serena's first shot, low left but clean, the woman cradled the pistol to her chest and whispered, I haven't touched one of these since to crit. Didn't think I ever would. Emma answered by tightening the woman's grip a fraction and stepping back. That became the rhythm. Adjust, breathe, step away. At week's end, Dalton managed 5 controlled triggers without flinching at phantom mortar. He lowered the pistol, eyes wet, and muttered, Feels like I found the volume knob. Emma offered no reply, only twisted the wedding band that still gleamed dully under Texas sun. Mid-April brought an unmarked envelope to the office mail slot. Inside lay a single page and slanted pen. I built a life out of victories I didn't truly understand. You built one out of living. I was wrong. I'd like to say that aloud. No cameras, no spin. Blake Radcliffe. Rebecca Johnson confirmed the sender. Blake Radcliffe. Rebecca Johnson confirmed the sender. Blake Radcliffe, recently freed on bond, requesting a private audience. Echo Company permitted the visit under 2 conditions: no press, no entourage. They met in a plain lounge that smelled of pine cleaner. Blake entered alone, denim and flannel replacing sponsor jackets, eyes hollow after public autopsy. He sat across from Emma, words barricaded behind a swallow. I spent 10 years chasing lenses, he began. Cups, checks, followers. I told myself winning was proof of worth. He rubbed his palms together until friction reddened skin. Then you stood there with a scar and made the bullseye look inevitable. I hated you for showing me what fighting actually is. Emma waited. Quiet had become her first language. He inhaled shakily.
I sabotaged the match because I thought legacy outranked fairness. You reminded me legacies are written by the people watching, not the person posing. His gaze lifted. I'm not asking forgiveness, just recognition that I finally see the difference. She rose, brace clicking, extended a hand. This doesn't erase what happened. It closes the file. Her grasp was firm, soldier's grip, not savior's. Take the time the investigation gives you, Mr. Radcliffe. Figure out what shooting is without applause. He nodded, relief and regret cross-hatching his features, then left through a side door no cameras guarded. A month later, a new frame went up on Echo's classroom wall. Emma stood on a step stool to straighten her own image, eyes calm behind range glasses, block-angled muzzle down. Below, a cedar plaque read, Emma Khan, Keeper of the Promise. Smaller script followed, not all who survive remain whole, but if your hands still close, hold the line steady. Most mornings she arrived before sunrise and spent 2 silent minutes facing the outdoor targets. She didn't fire, she simply let the dawn wash the silhouettes gold. Remembering a battlefield rooftop, a voice saying, deep breath, you already know. Then, classes began. Steady hands, scarred hands, prosthetic hooks wrapped around triggers, and she guided them toward that same hook. Some evenings the wind through the oaks sounded exactly like a helicopter receding. On those nights, Emma would touch the plaque as she locked up, whisper one word, still. The Texas sky in late October was a pale, deliberate blue, the sort of sky painters tried to imitate with too much white. A mild breeze idled across Echo Company's back range, barely strong enough to turn the wind flag. The sun hung far enough south that its light arrived soft without summer's hammer-blow glare. Emma Cole stood at the 50-yard line beside 3 new students, all of them settling boots or prosthetics into ochre dirt that smelled of cedar mulch and gun oil. Trey was 24, trim, with a titanium arm socket exposed where shirt sleeve met harness. He greeted challenges with a lopsided, collegiate grin that didn't quite hide anxiety. Luis, once an artillery sergeant, blinked fast whenever gravel popped underfoot. Words came out in bursts, as though each syllable needed permission from his amygdala. Morgan O'Connell, cautious, wore a black patch over her left eye. She kept one hand knotted in a hoodie pocket, like she might bolt if the world lurched. Yet in all 3 faces, Emma could see the ember one thin filament of resolve. She wore the usual sun-bleached field shirt, scuffed jungle boots, brace, cinched tie. Daniel's notebook, freshly rebound in dark calfskin by Echo's quartermaster, peeked from her back pocket. She had rehearsed no speech, only truths. I'm not a champion, she told them, voice pitched direct, but unrushed. What I am is someone who's learned how to stand up after no one's watching. The range fell quiet, save for flag rope tapping its pole. Inhale 4, hold 4, exhale 4, hold. Trey's shoulders softened, Luis's hands stopped fluttering. Then she introduced hardware. 3 benches spaced apart, 3 weapons chosen for bodies, still renegotiating their mechanic. For Trey, a customized AR platform sporting a side-fold brace he could lock into a shoulder hook. For Luis, a Glock with a tuned 2-pound trigger and extended slide cutlass. Rattle, more forgiveness. For Morgan, a 22-bolt action with a cantilevered offset optic, so her remaining eye could align without strain.
No race, Emma said, adjusting Morgan's stance by a finger's width. Nothing to conquer, only room to breathe. Luis flinched at the first dry-fire click. Emma tapped the back of his hand, grounding, not scolding. When Trey struggled to cycle the bolt with one arm, she produced a paracord loop and showed him how to rack using torso leverage. Morgan's depth perception threw her aim wide. Emma had her practice closing the good eye for a second, then opening and treating the sight picture as a new horizon. By midday, the breeze picked up, carrying barbecue from a food truck out front. Sweat darkened Trey's collar. Luis's laughter, rusty, echoed when he finally managed a smooth press. Emma let it stand, unremarked. Teaching was mostly subtraction. Remove panic, remove shame, reveal capacity that never truly left. Winning's not on a syllabus, she reminded them. Quitting isn't either. At session's end, she paced them 10 yards back, loaded a single round into each chamber and stepped clear. 3 shots cracked almost in harmony, none centered, all slolled on paper. The students lowered weapons. For a frozen beat, they stared at the holes they'd punched through fear more than cardboard. Trey whooped, Luis wiped his eyes. Morgan's shoulders, usually drawn tight as bowstrings, slumped in something like relief. First line crossed, Emma thought. Now the miles. That afternoon, Colonel Harrison gathered press in the modest auditorium, a room of folding chairs and an American flag, whose stars were dimmed by sun bleaching. Emma stood off stage holding the framed photograph of Daniel, two Marines grinning in dust fog, like shadows of rotor blades, slashing the ground behind them. The colonel cleared his throat. Echo Company is proud to launch the Daniel Cole Scholarship, full tuition, housing and adaptive shooting certification for veterans who want to teach marksmanship therapy. He gestured toward Emma. Sergeant Cole will serve as honorary mentor. No salary, her account is paid in something deeper. Flashes fired. Reporters lobbed questions. Why name the scholarship after your late husband? Emma answered only once. He said if he couldn't come home, maybe his name could help someone else get there. She left the podium before follow-up. On stage right, Luis waited, uniform shirt damp with nerves. When the colonel announced him as the first recipient, a soldier who'd spent half a year refusing to leave his apartment, Luis tried speaking but only managed a choked, "Gracias." The room stood anyway. Applause filled the acoustic tiles. Later, Emma gave him the frame to hold. "Weights lighter shared," she said. Luis clutched it like a climbing rope thrown down. Dusk bled copper across the back range. Class had dispersed. Even administration lights winked out one by one. Emma walked alone to the memorial grove, where Echo kept a granite slab etched with names. Training accidents, combat, KIs, suicides counted in silent campaigns. The live oak canopy rustled overhead, leaves clicking like spent cases. She traced a fingertip over Daniel R. Cole. Felt cool stone, felt absent. The wedding band turned beneath her thumb. Warming. "I keep going," she whispered. "Not with you, but for you." She paused, listening for helicopter echo or ghost replies. Just whined enough, and for everyone still on the edge of coming home. From the far benches she heard muted chatter. Luis helping Morgan stack foam barriers. Luis laughing at a joke she couldn't catch. Their silhouettes cut against the sunset, imperfect but upright. Emma smiled. Small, genuine, private. The grin was not for victory, but for continuity. Proof that stories did not die at chapter ending, only changed narrators. A lone black-winged bird shot across the sky, banking toward distant pines. No one plotted its flight path. No lens tracked destination. It was simply motion, insisting forward. And for those still beneath the branches, living, teaching, relearning breath, its arc was enough reminder that nothing living gets left behind if somebody keeps the line of sight open. Emma turned back toward the barracks lights, now flicking on against growing dark. Her limp a quiet drumbeat in settling dust. Her promise, not to trophies, not to spectators. Each bright and certain as trace at dawn. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this story. We'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments below and let us know your favorite part. If you enjoyed the journey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more captivating stories like this one. And don't miss out, hit the notification bell so you're always updated on our latest content. Your support truly means the world to us. Commander Flint muttered, "Who trained her?" No one answered, because the answer was written in the way she exhaled, like a ghost of war. Lyra Maddox adjusted her stance, not out of uncertainty but precision. Silence fell across the range like dust before a storm. The crowd hadn't expected the gun to fire or the past to return with every crack. But that's what legends do, return quietly, and then roar. Commander Flint muttered, "Who trained her?" No one answered, because the answer was written in the way she exhaled, like a ghost of war. Lyra Maddox adjusted her stance, not out of uncertainty but precision. Silence fell across the range like dust before a storm.